Have you ever wondered who really bankrolled the Renaissance? We all know the names, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Brunelleschi, but behind these artistic giants stood a single family, a dynasty of bankers who wielded their wealth like a weapon and a paintbrush, secretly running the most glorious chapter in Western history. This is the story of the Medici, the godfathers of the Renaissance. Our story begins not in a grand palace, but in a dusty counting house in 15th century Florence. The Medici weren't born into nobility. They were wool merchants who pivoted into a far more lucrative business, banking. But they weren't just any bankers. Giovanni de' Medici, the patriarch, perfected a system of international finance, using letters of credit and double-entry bookkeeping. This might sound dry, but it was revolutionary. It allowed them to build a financial empire that stretched across Europe. But Giovanni's true genius was his discretion. He understood that in a republic like Florence, overt displays of power were dangerous. So, he operated from the shadows, building influence not through titles, but through favors, loans, and strategic alliances. He loaned money to everyone, from small merchants to powerful cardinals. And when the time came, he called in those debts, not for money, but for loyalty. He effectively controlled the city's political machine without ever holding the highest office. This strategy reached its zenith with his son, Cosimo de' Medici. After a brief exile orchestrated by jealous rival families, Cosimo returned to Florence not as a conqueror, but as a beloved father figure, hailed as Pater Patri, father of the fatherland. But make no mistake, his rule was absolute. He manipulated elections, exiled his enemies, and placed his allies in key government positions. Florence was a republic in name only. In reality, it was the Medici's personal fiefdom. So, where does the art come in? This is where the Medici strategy becomes truly brilliant. They understood that power wasn't just about controlling votes. It was about capturing hearts and minds. And what better way to do that than through breathtaking art and architecture? They initiated a public relations campaign of epic proportions, funding projects that would glorify not just God, but Florence and, by extension, themselves. Think of the iconic dome of the Florence Cathedral, a marvel of engineering by Filippo Brunelleschi. For years, the cathedral stood with a giant hole in its roof, an embarrassment to the city. It was the Medici, specifically Cosimo, who backed the ambitious and seemingly impossible plan to complete it. Every time a Florentine looked up at that magnificent dome, they were subconsciously reminded of Medici, power, and generosity. It was a permanent advertisement for their reign. They turned art patronage into a political tool. They sponsored the young rebellious sculptor Donatello, whose realistic and emotionally charged statues broke from medieval tradition. They established the Platonic Academy, a think tank for the greatest humanist philosophers of the day. This wasn't just about pretty pictures. It was about positioning Florence, and therefore the Medici, as the intellectual and cultural center of the world. They were crafting a legacy. This tradition of power patronage was passed down to Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici, known to history as Lorenzo the Magnificent. Lorenzo wasn't the shrewd banker his grandfather was. He was a poet, a statesman, and a connoisseur of talent. His court was a magnet for the brightest stars of the Renaissance. He discovered a teenage Michelangelo Buonarroti, inviting him to live in the Medici palace and treating him like a son. He commissioned works from Botticelli, including the ethereal Primavera and the Birth of Venus, paintings that have come to define the Renaissance aesthetic. Under Lorenzo, Florence became a real-life Camelot. But this golden age was built on a precarious foundation of debt and simmering resentment. While Lorenzo was busy funding art and poetry, the Medici Bank began to falter. More dangerously, their power had made them powerful enemies. In 1478, their rivals, the Pazzi family, with the quiet backing of the Pope himself, attempted a coup. The Pazzi conspiracy was something straight out of a gangster movie. The plan was to assassinate Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano during High Mass in the Florence Cathedral. In the midst of prayer, the assassin struck. Giuliano was brutally killed, stabbed 19 times. Lorenzo, wounded but alive, fought his way to the sacristy and barricaded himself inside. The coup failed. The people of Florence, loyal to the Medici, rose up and exacted a brutal revenge on the conspirators. This violent episode only solidified Lorenzo's power, transforming him from a de facto ruler into a living legend. But the Medici's influence wasn't just confined to Florence. Their greatest power play was infiltrating the most powerful institution in the world, the Catholic Church. Remember those loans to cardinals? They paid off spectacularly. Giovanni de' Medici, Lorenzo the Magnificent's own son, became Pope Leo X. Now a Medici was not just pulling the strings from behind the curtain. He was sitting on the throne of St. Peter. As Pope Leo X used the Vatican's treasury as his personal piggy bank to fund the Medici's artistic ambitions in Rome. He made Raphael his chief painter and commissioned him to decorate the papal apartments. And, most importantly, he greenlit the grand project to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica, appointing Michelangelo as one of its chief architects. But how do you pay for the most expensive building project in history? Leo X ramped up the sale of indulgences get-out purgatory-free cards. This blatant monetization of salvation infuriated a German monk named Martin Luther, directly triggering the Protestant Reformation and shattering the unity of Western Christendom. In a way, the Medici's obsession with art and legacy broke the church they had worked so hard to control. From bankers to popes, from political bosses to artistic visionaries, the Medici family's story is a masterclass in the intricate dance of money, power, art, and religion. They didn't just fund the Renaissance. They curated it, directed it, and branded it. They turned Florence into their personal showroom and used art as a sophisticated tool for political dominance, while artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo were the hands that created the masterpieces. It was the Medici who were the invisible architects of the entire era. They proved that those who control the money, control the world, and can even buy a piece of immortality. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into the secret history of the Medici fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the power players who shaped our world. Let us know in the comments which historical family you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video.